Welcome to the Patricia Fripp Sales Series. Today's subject is bridging the gap with millennials. Easy for you to say. I'm very excited. My guest is a best-selling author we met when we both spoke at the Sales 2.0 conference. Here's just a little of his background. Michael Nick is the best-selling author and founder of ROI for Sales. In 2014, he merged with another company into Technology Finance Partners. And what they do is improve the way technology is valued, priced, and sold. They provide companies with vendor finance programs, ROI tools and field support, customized sales training, and consulting services. His latest book, Adapt or Fail, apparently an awesome book, is the foundation of our discussion. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's it's always good to collaborate with the country's best presentation skills expert.
And you will get your critique at the end.
I'm sure I will.
And we have a very important third member of the team, Paul, who will tell you how to engage, send your questions, and lead the polls. We understand many of you are live and many watch the replay, but we want to engage with you if you happen to be live. Take it away, Paul.
Hello, everyone. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a chat window. Within that chat window, you can ask your short, specific questions throughout the call, and they'll be answered live. In addition to the chat, we will be having polling questions throughout the call. The polling question will come up just below the chat window. You'll click your answer, vote, and then we'll discuss the results. You'll have about a minute for each poll. And we're going to start the first poll with, are you a millennial? Pretty simple, just yes or no. Click your answer and then vote.
And certainly, please do not think if you are one that we don't like you. The whole purpose of this event is to make sure that we get along and understand you better, because we do know that you are changing and soon to rule the world. So, Michael, I know many of my clients are saying, Patricia, how can we better understand and incorporate millennials into our teams? Many of their managers don't quite know how to cope. So you are the solution.
Well, I hope to be the solution anyway. Let me start, interestingly enough, with a quote that says, the children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders and love chatter in place of exercise. Now, this is a quote from 450 BC. Socrates, Plato said this in Socrates' voice. So it's interesting how that long ago they predicted what's going to happen today. So what I'd like to do is to help everybody on with us today, Patricia, and to understand a little bit about millennials. I think the first step in bridging the gap or getting along or selling to is understanding them. So let's just start with a few of the stats. The first one is that they were born between 1980 and 1995. Now, there are people that disagree with this. They think 82 to 2000, but this is sort of the standard that most of my research indicates 1980 to 1995 they were born. Right now, there are about 76 million millennials. Now, to put that in perspective, there's 74 million baby boomers and only 46 million Gen Xers. Now, with the 76 million baby boomers starting to retire, I mean, 1959 would have been the last baby boomer. They're going to retire in the next 5 to 8 years. That means that your millennials are going to be the majority, of course, of the working class. Here's the big problem right now is millennials coming out of college today or this year, and the millennials that came out of college from 1997 or 2001, they're going to be $1 trillion in debt. This is a major problem, and you'll see that as we move on with some of the additional statistics like this one. Millennials' unemployment rate is about 16%. That is huge. Over 250,000 millennials are working for minimum wage. So if you're working for minimum wage, a little difficult to pay back that student debt. They are the most educated generation ever. More of them have gone to college than any other generation. 63% have bachelor's degree. The median salary coming out of college, about $40,000 a year. And by the year 2020, they're going to make up to 70% of the workforce. Now, the reason I say up to is that, again, most experts say it's between 47 and 70%. And it really depends upon what happens to our economy and what happens to baby boomers in the near 5 years. Because if they have a bad economy, they're not putting away enough money to retire, they're going to stay in the workforce a little longer, which is going to stunt the growth of that millennial generation. So it's going to be a lot of millennials making up the workforce. I always like to say, today's millennials, tomorrow's buyers, somewhere down the line. Now, here's some statistics from Beyond.com, and they did this study where they have statistics, and then they compared them to what HR thinks in some instances. So 75% of millennials see themselves as authentic, and they're not willing to compromise their values. 82% say they are loyal to their employer. Now, an HR study by Beyond.com, and what they did is they went out and they interviewed HR managers. They think about 11% are loyal to their employer. So that's a big difference between what a millennial thinks and what HR thinks. 92% believe business success should be measured by more than profit. It has to be the only generation that believes that. 69% believe office attendance is unnecessary. I certainly like this one, of course, and I'm in that 69% as well, even though I'm not a millennial. 56% say they won't work for a company if they ban social media. This is a big deal right now. In fact, I have my sister-in-law she manages a series of, or a group of nursing homes, and they've implemented a policy now that once an hour for 5 to 10 minutes, they are allowing people to do a social media break so that they can check their phones. Otherwise, they're not allowed on their phones. 65% think they are people savvy. Again, Beyond.com disagrees with this in their HR survey. They say only about 2 or 3% think they're people savvy is what the HR managers believe. So statistically, it's interesting. It's an interesting generation. And here's how you get to know a millennial. The first thing is that they're untethered and they're flexible. And what this really means is that they're willing to move, they're willing to travel, they're willing to do whatever's necessary to complete a task. And again, by definition, they are the most traveled generation ever. They also like variety. They're energetic. They like fast pace. They have to have a challenge. They're innovative. And since you and I talked, I went out and did a little research for us. And I wanted to know what are some of the coolest inventions that millennials have come up with. And the first was the edible blob. They invented the edible blob. Now, I don't exactly know what that is.
What is the edible blob?
Yeah, it's actually a blob that is edible. Honestly, I don't know. But here are some good things they've done. They invented a robotic arm for paralyzed patients, which is very cool. They invented an energy-generating soccer ball. If you kick this ball around for 30 minutes, it generates enough power to charge a phone or a small appliance, which I think is kind of cool. And then they invented a chewing gum that fights cavities. So those are some of the inventions that this innovative generation has put together, which I think is pretty cool. And of course, Mark Zuckerberg is a millennial, and he invented Facebook. They are adaptable. And what this means is that they're willing to learn, and they're obviously very adept at the internet. They can research nearly anything. They live on YouTube. My son YouTubes how to cook salmon or how to change the brakes in a car. So I have 3 millennial children, so I'm used to this stuff. They are certainly comfortable with technology, and they're also willing to teach. If you don't understand the technology, one of the gaps that you can bridge is to ask a millennial for help. I mean, they are more than willing to help you do that. And also remember, they're the first generation to grow up with technology. I mean, we had to learn the internet. They grew up with the internet. They are masters at multitasking, and I'm going to show you a stat in a little while that shows that they spend over 20 hours a day on technology or with technology. Now, that would be impossible to do that every day, so clearly they are multitasking. And then a job, it's certainly more than a paycheck. I pulled a Pew Research poll that said 35% of millennials said they would take a 15% pay cut to work for a company that was committed to social responsibility. And I find that really, really interesting because a lot of people wouldn't do that. You know, it's really one of those few generations that are willing to do that, take that cut to be more socially conscious.
And another stat that might interest you, only 5% of our audience is millennials.
Wow, huh? So it's that Gen X and boomers and that are trying to bridge the gap. So I hope.
Yes, so that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope this really helps. I hope that it helps you understand where they're coming from. And again, they're such a large generation, and technology plays a big part in their growth.
Now, I can see giving them a 5 to 10 minute social media break. That would be better than going outside and smoking.
Yeah, definitely. They found that if they give them the break, I mean, if you don't give them the break, they're going to sneak it anyway.
Yes,
I mean, that's kind of where it's going. Yeah, I was speaking last week to an audience, and I was telling them that my daughter is an expert texter. She is 22 years old, or 20. She just turned 22 this weekend. She's 22 years old, and she won a blind texting contest in driver's ed. Probably not the best place to be texting in the car.
Wow.
And she's proud of it. So they are a generation of, they want their social media and they live for social media. Let me dispel some rumors or some beliefs. The first belief that baby boomers have of millennials is that they're entitled, that they're lazy, that they want everything to come to them right away. They're not willing to put in the work. Well, there are really two separate generations of millennials. The first is that generation that was born between 1980 and 1986. So think about this. If you were born between 1980 and 1986, you came out of school right when 9/11 hit.
Yeah.
So America was facing big problems. We went into a deep, deep recession. They took minimum wage jobs in fields other than their field of study. So they came out of college with this bachelor's degree or master's degree, and there were no jobs. I mean, unemployment was in double digits back then. So, I mean, they really, really had a difficult time. To compound that problem, they had massive debt. You know, now it's over $1 trillion. Back then it was, say $500 billion even. That's a lot of debt to come out of college with. Students were coming out with $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 in debt and taking a minimum wage job. So that generation of 80 to 96, they had a tough time, and they continue to have a difficult time. They are definitely not entitled. They are definitely not lazy, and they are certainly willing to put in the effort to find a real positive position. The second set was born between 87 and 95. Now, this is really strange because it's a different generation than those born between 80 and 86. Now, clearly, they had some issues as well. They came out of college when there was still a bit of a recession, but we were recovering. A lot of them are coming out of college now where there are plenty of jobs in healthcare. There's plenty of jobs in financial services. There's always jobs in sales if you're good. This generation is not taking those minimum wage jobs. They're the generation that's moving back home and living with their parents because they can't find a job. So they're waiting it out. They're trying to figure it out. But there is a lot more opportunity for this set of millennials, for those born between 87 and 95. And that generation really is probably what people refer to as those entitled ones, because they probably are a little bit more entitled. They're that generation that everybody gets a trophy. They had praise on them constantly about they can do anything, they can go anywhere, they can grow, they traveled a lot. Again, the most traveled generation ever. So it's really, be careful when you categorize millennials into it's an entitled generation. So I believe there are 4 keys to understanding millennials. The first thing that you really want to understand is that they want to matter. Millennials they want meaningful work. Again, I have 3 millennial children, and I hear this all the time. They want to know what they're doing fits into the bigger picture. They want to know that what they're doing matters to not only the group they work within or the part of a company they work in, but they want to matter to the organization. They want to know what they're doing matters and helps an organization grow. The second thing is that they want dialogue. Millennials crave constant dialogue about their work. I mean, this is our fault. We're baby boomers. We raised them. We gave them constant feedback, told them how great they are, that they can do anything. Beyond's survey on this said that 60% of millennials say they want feedback from their boss on a daily basis. So again, if you're not a millennial and you're a boss sitting out there wondering, how do I get along with them? How do I motivate them? The first thing you want to do is make sure they know they matter, what they're doing, and how it affects the overall organization. And the second thing is tell them when they do the right thing. Take, why did you do it that way? Why did you do this out of your vocabulary? Use words like, what you did is great, but how can we make it better? Change the way you communicate with millennials.
Well,
the thing I hear, yes, please.
On our call live, we have 50% sales managers.
Okay.
So just so you know, so that's important for them.
That is very important for them. When you hire millennial salespeople, you want to absolutely talk to them on a regular basis. You want to find out what they're doing. Make sure they understand their role in the big picture. Make sure that you praise them when they're doing great things. The next two, well, at least this one anyway, opportunity is really important to millennials. And again, having millennial children in the workforce now, I hear this all the time. I don't know what my future is. I want to know where I'm going from here. I want to know the next step in my career. They don't want to be stuck. 90% of millennials believe that they will be on a job less than 3 years. So think about this. If it costs $24,000 is the estimated figure to replace a millennial, if it costs $24,000 to turn over your millennial sales force every time you do, it's really expensive. It's a whole lot cheaper to keep them. And the way you keep them is tell them they matter, have a dialogue, and show them their path going forward. Show them the opportunity that they have within your organization, and they'll stay. I mean, they believe they're loyal, remember? I mean, that was one of the first stats I showed you is Yes. They believe that they're loyal to the organization. This is the fourth thing is the one that really is the difference between, I believe, their generation and, our generation, Patricia, is that millennials want a full life. Millennials want work and life. And they're willing to give up promotions and things like that for that full life. Whereas our generation, we worked. My father worked in the same job his whole life. He took a job at 17 and he retired from that same place when he was 65. You don't see that anymore. There's no work is the most important thing in my life attitude. Millennials work hard and they're willing to work hard, but they want to do it on their time. They want to do it at their pace, and they want it to not interfere with their personal life. I mean, these are the four keys to really understanding a millennial. They want to matter, talk to them on a regular basis, work out your feedback with them. Tell them, here's how often we talk. Here's how often we're going to do things. You have to lay it out for them. You have to communicate and explain to them step by step by step by step what's going to happen and when. They want to know. They're going to keep questioning you until you do. They want to know their career path, and it's sort of in conflict with the full life bubble. I understand that, but they absolutely want to know what their opportunity is to grow. And then again, they want work and home life together. This is a study by Dr. Larry Rosen, and let me break it down for you a little bit. On the left-hand side, the online, on computer, email, IM chat, this is the technology that the three generations are accessing every day. The 2.31 right at the top online under millennials, that's how many hours a day that millennials spend online compared to the 1.14 baby boomers are spending online. Millennials spend a couple hours a day on computers. Funny. Millennials only 1.41. Email, pretty much even, 1.2, an hour and a half, pretty much everybody around an hour and a half. Interestingly enough, IM and chat, millennials almost 2 hours, boomers 15 minutes. Big disparity there. Millennials on the phone, this is probably the one that surprised me the most in that 2 hours on a phone. Typically, you don't see millennials want to talk. They're more of a texter, emailer, some other type of social media connections. You will rarely see them get up and walk down the hall to talk to someone. where we as baby boomers don't understand that. We're like, I want to be next to you. I want to talk to you. I want to do a face-to-face. Texting, look at that difference. Texting, 2 hours and 20 minutes for a millennial, 30 minutes or 28 minutes for a baby boomer. That is incredible. You want to get along with your millennials? You want to learn how to communicate better with your millennials? I'll give you a couple of tips here. The first is learn to text, because they will respond to your text. I communicate with my kids every day all over the country, and they want to do it by text. Every once in a while, my daughter will call me, but for the most part, they want to text. The second thing that you want to do is, and I'm a little off topic here, but I really think it's important that your listeners understand this, especially when the majority are baby boomers or Gen Xers. The second thing you absolutely want to understand when working with millennials is, on average, millennials are connected to 16 people in your office. That's just an average figure that research indicates. You want to absolutely connect with millennials in your office on social media. Social media being LinkedIn, Twitter, because what happens in your office happens in the world. Because what they're doing is they're clearly texting, social media, tweeting, Facebook. They're putting this information out so the world can see. They're a worldly generation. And so to communicate effectively, to collaborate with a millennial, you need to be in their circle. And that circle is social media and texting. So that's a big disparity here on the texting, and you absolutely need to close that gap. Video games, an hour versus 13 minutes. Music, look at the music, almost 3 times. 333 to 144. And then television's pretty much even. But the bottom is what's interesting in this whole chart, is millennials spend 20.5 hours a day on technology. That is unbelievable. And baby boomers, 7, almost 8 hours a day on technology. Now, how do they do it? They do it by multitasking. They are masters of multitasking. And again, having millennial children, and those of you that do will laugh because you absolutely know this, is let's say you're watching television with your millennial child. You're watching television, and they're sitting on the sofa watching television with their cell phone in their hand texting to someone, and their iPad in their other hand playing some sort of a game or doing something else, doing research or surfing the internet or something like that. So they have 3 devices going at the same time while you're just watching television. So they are masters at multitasking, and you can take advantage of this as an employer. I mean, this is one of the great attributes of this generation, is you can give them multiple tasks. You can challenge them to accomplish multiple projects. So I mean, it's a great generation for multitasking.
And Michael, you might be interested to know our statistics changed while you were talking. So we now have 57%. 57% of the audience is sales managers.
Great. Well, we're going to move right into that then. Let's talk about selling.
And then we also have a few comments in the chat as well whenever you all are ready for that.
Okay. I did a survey.
Yes.
Again, having 3 millennial children, it was pretty easy to get emails of all their friends. And so we put out a survey to about 48 of their friends. And I got 36, let me just look real quick, 37, excuse me. I got 37 responses. And this is one of the responses from Carly. And I asked the question, how do you buy? Now, these are millennials that are in all different sorts of positions. Some of them a couple work for Johnson Controls, some of them work for Manpower, some of them work for Northern Trust doing research. So I really wanted to understand, how do you buy? And this I thought was an interesting statement. It came out a couple of times. People said similar things. But personally, I do a lot of online research. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But then this is what I thought was interesting, is then I talked to my friends, my family, and subject matter experts, and others who have been in the same position before. When buying a product, we all look to represent and reflect our own personal brand as much as possible. And Carly, in this instance, I called her and asked her this, and she says she was thinking of Apple when she wrote this, is how Apple markets to the market, how they sell. And they've created this brand that you personalize as a millennial, you associate with as a millennial. She said that they spend so much time online that online ads are a big influence for them. And so I thought this was an interesting revelation to how millennials buy, because as millennials start to move into more buying positions where they can influence a buy or they can make the buy themselves, what we want to make sure we do is the first thing we want to do as an organization is you want to have an online presence, right? I mean, you absolutely want an online presence. And I find that millennials love video. They absolutely love to watch videos. So if you're a business owner or you have influence on your website, that would be my first task, would be to make sure my website is SEO, search engine optimization ready. The second, I would have video, and the third, I would have really good content. Then I would make sure that the content on there helps them understand that we are experts. We are the keys to buying whatever product or service that you happen to be selling. So when you sell to millennials...
Okay, well,
yeah, sure, go ahead.
Let's look at you, Michael. Answer the questions we have and then come back to selling. Would that work?
That would. Give me one moment here to stop sharing my screen. There we go. And there I am.
So this is fascinating information. So I'm hearing that actually you give me some information. I say great employees, then others. Well, I mean, I don't expect people to be taking 10 minutes social media breaks. And then you tell me something else. And then I wonder, well, am I a good enough company that they would want to work with me? So fascinating. So Paul,
that's for sure.
We'll throw it back to you to pose the questions.
All right. Well, we have a few comments. Karen said that the problem was that the worst advice this generation got was go to college. It doesn't matter what degree you get. So that's what they did. They get a degree with no direction, no goals except to get a degree, and then graduate with $40,000 in debt.
Yeah.
I would beg to differ partially on that. I think there are millennials that did that. I absolutely agree with you 100%. But I can tell you that there are a lot of millennials coming out of college with nursing degrees, with business finance degrees, with international business degrees. And I think that generation of people that did that will have no trouble finding positions going forward. I think there are a percentage, and I honestly don't know that percentage, but it sounds like it's somewhere around 16% based on the unemployment rate that went and did exactly what Karen is saying. So yeah, I can't totally disagree with you.
Okay.
All right, then we have, do you see a difference between the educated millennial and the uneducated millennial? Some make the argument that the uneducated millennial who are working in manufacturing, for instance, aren't motivated or do not think the same way a college-educated millennial thinks and sees the world.
Well, yes. I mean, that I think that's obvious only from the sense that college is supposed to teach you to think. I mean, isn't that why we go to college, is to change the way we view the world, to challenge us and think and make decisions. But I will tell you this. I think the millennials, and again, it's not all, but I think that the millennials that went into, say, manufacturing jobs work hard. That's a hard job. I mean, look at America. We are clearly moving our manufacturing jobs offshore. We're moving it to countries that are willing to do that kind of work. I'm not sure this generation's willing to do that kind of work, which could be a major challenge for the United States in the future. I mean, a lot of our manufacturing is moving. Thousands of companies are moving to Mexico and China and other places. I mean, look at near the Mexican border in Southern California. I mean, they are hiring immigrants to come in on day passes even to pick fruit and vegetables because Americans don't want to do it. So I think that you're onto something there, but I also think they're very hardworking. If you're in that position, that's a tough job, man. That's a tough life. I mean, think about it. You're going to spend the rest of your life doing manufacturing, working in a manufacturing plant. It's tough. My parents did it, or my father did. So.
Okay, Paul.
All right, now we have, this is from a comment from earlier. Kim said she's not sure if it's entitlement or an unwillingness to compromise. Mm-hmm. And then Karen mentioned that other generations aren't as entitled do you see the millennials trying to understand Gen X, the Gen X generation, or the baby boomers generation?
There's a lot of material there. Let me start with entitlement. I believe that they, as in baby boomers and Gen Xers, believe that millennials are entitled. And here's what you need to start with is we raised them, right? I mean, I raised 3 millennials, and I'm told all the time how entitled my children are. But didn't we want a better life for our children than we had for ourselves? And so I worked really hard to make sure they had all these opportunities. I let them travel. My children have been not all over the world. They've been to multiple countries, and they traveled throughout the U.S., and I made sure they had those opportunities. So if you want to call that entitlement, all right, it's entitlement. But I wish my parents gave me those opportunities as well. So that's the first part of your question. The second part where, Paul, will you refresh my memory and read it one more time? Just the question.
Essentially, why isn't there a big push for millennials to try to work at understanding baby boomers or Gen Xers?
Yeah. It depends. And I know this isn't the answer you want to hear, but I believe some millennials do and some millennials don't. It's pretty much like any generation. And here's the difference, is that every generation evolved to make the previous generation, to make the next generation better. The 50s were great. The 60s, think of all the new innovations and all the great things that came out of the 60s. And challenging things as well. The 70s were great years. 80s, so every generation or every decade got better and better and better because that generation evolved. I mean, in the 50s, they used to think, these children are incorrigible, but yet they were nothing compared to today. So I think that there are millennials that are trying to understand that generation or the previous generations. I will tell you this about millennials, and this is a fact that almost every expert agrees on. This is a generation that is still tied to their parents. And that's an interesting statement because there are people that have told me, there are HR managers that have told me that they've had millennials' parents come to job interviews. When they had to notify the millennial of bad news, they notified the parents first. So the parents are still very much so involved in millennials' lives. And I mean, my children call me, thankfully, a lot asking for advice. Our CFO says he gets a text or a phone call from his children every day. They call him and tell him, even if it's just say hi or I'm doing great. So it's a generation that is still tied to their parents. And as long as we continue to influence this generation, again, I believe this generation will evolve. And I believe that we can teach them if we would just take a moment and teach them more and more about our generation. I mean, man, I loved listening to my grandmother tell me about the 30s and the 40s and crazy things. So I think they'll evolve.
I remember my dad, who was in the real estate business, when Tony Jones, who ended up my father's business partner, when he came to interview at age 16, his father came with him basically to speak for him. So yeah. I find that fascinating that is a real cycle, and this is decades.
It's not as unusual as you would think, Patricia. It really isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Paul, are there any specific questions before we get to how do you sell to and buy from?
Well, there's a number of comments that they're interacting with each other, but there's one question that kind of stuck out. Ken says that Dr. Robert Jack, professor at Case Western Reserve University, says that the internet threatens to make us socially disconnected. Technology is in danger of making us impersonal, of dampening our capacity and tendency for human connection. How do you reconcile that with millennials?
Yeah, therein lies the challenge. And again, I keep going back to millennials want feedback every day. They want to hear from their boss every day. And I think the more that you challenge them, the more that you interact with them, the more opportunity you have to stop the internet from doing that to society. I saw a wonderful article by, I think it was Barb Giamanco, on you can't kiss a computer screen. You can't get a hug from a computer screen.
Well, you can, but it's not going to pucker up and kiss back.
Yeah, it's true. And you may get shocked or something. I don't know. But there are so many social interactions that humans crave, and the internet just doesn't do that for you. So, I mean, I hope they evolve into a society that does not rely on the internet to, take care of all their physical and emotional needs. You can't get a hug from a computer screen. And like you said, you could, but you're not going to get hugged back.
Yeah. Okay, well, Michael, if we can transition into the sales portion, because, of course, this is fascinating, and seeing by the amount of comments, obviously people are enjoying your remarks. And yes, selling to
millennials. Well, as a sales manager, and there are, as you said, 57% of you are sales managers, I assume you have a sales process. If you don't, you probably need one. And that process includes qualification, discovery, demonstration, proposal, and close. Now, obviously, yours may be somewhat different, but you have a number of steps that you forecast by. We qualify a prospect, we perform some sort of quantitative discovery, we demonstrate our value, we produce a proposal, and then we move to close. Well, millennials have a buying pattern as well. The first thing they do, and again, we got this from our research, the first thing they do is they need to understand that and be aware that they have a need. So I have a problem, I need to solve that problem. And that would be, I need to buy an apartment, I need to buy a computer, I need to do something. The second step in their process is research. And this we, again, understand because they are research animals. They are fantastic at research. They YouTube it. They check social media. They ask their friends. They are one of the best researchers of any generation. They're fantastic at it. And because they're so familiar with the internet, of course. Next thing is they look at demonstrations or presentations. They want to see how it fits into their life. They want to understand they want to see the future of whatever their purchase is going to be before they make that purchase. Then they weigh their options, and then they make their final purchase. So their sales and buying pattern isn't all that different from yours. You're going to qualify, you're going to discover, and do your demo. So in the perfect world, when you are selling to a millennial and a millennial is buying, you're going to create maybe a business value hypothesis. You're going to do an ROI, maybe some quantitative discovery. All these things line up. You're at one phase, they're at the same. Here you might do an executive financial summary or something. But what happens when you're here and they're there? That's where the challenge becomes. Because statistically, 60% of the sales process, and this holds true with millennials as well, 60% of their process is done by the time you are contacted. But remember, when you are contacted, millennials have done their homework. They know all about you. They've done research on you. They've checked references on you. They've looked at social media. They've looked at, they've maybe used tools like Inside View, so they really get the news and all the trigger event things that are going on in your organization. So what has to occur here is that you need to adjust because they're not going to. If they're on the demonstration phase, you need to move to the demonstration phase and then not abandon qualification and discovery, but shift qualification and discovery to part of your demonstration. So you have to include it. You can't break it out separately like you had in the past. So it's very, very important that you understand that alignment is what's important here. So no matter what your phases of your process are going to be and what the phases and process that the millennial is going to be, or for that matter, really any organization, you need to make sure that you are in alignment with where they are and their process. Because I can tell you, if you're on discovery and they're on demonstration, you're not going to win the deal. If they're on awareness and you're doing demos, you got a serious problem. So you want to make sure that you align with where they are in their process.
That is very interesting. And okay, yes, give us your suggestions.
Yeah.
You set me up perfectly to do a demo.
Wonderful. Yeah. Very quickly, my 7 simple suggestions for dealing or bridging that gap with millennials. And if you look to the picture to the right, I thought that was pretty funny. The G is for gram, MG is for milligram, KG for kilogram, and the kid in the audience says, what about Instagram? I just thought that was cute. The first thing that you need to do with a millennial is to build trust. And one of the things that you can do to build trust of course, is to have a genuine concern for them. And then secondly, what I think is probably the most important thing is complete transparency. Again, I cannot stress to you enough how technologically advanced a millennial is. If you have millennials within your organization, you're now connected to the world. And if you have a layoff coming, you do not want them to hear about it on the internet. And when it does occur, you know that it's going to go out to the world almost instantly. So when you're communicating with a millennial, you need to be honest, upfront. You need to be extremely transparent. The second thing is to show respect, and this of course applies to any employee or employer. You want to try to listen to their ideas. You want to consider a millennial's idea before you automatically disregard them. Oh, it's just a millennial, it's bunk. You don't want that. You absolutely need to show respect and listen to them. They have some good ideas. I mean, a robotic arm, a energy generating soccer ball, thought that Facebook, pretty cool. You need to be willing to grow. I think that you have to approach any situation with a millennial from the growth mindset, from the aspect that I can learn something and I can grow from this interaction. This is kind of goes back to showing respect and building trust, because if you're willing to approach every opportunity with growth in mind, it's going to show trust and clearly it's going to show respect. Follow through. This is extremely important to millennials. Millennials want to, if you're going to commit to something, then be sure you do it. And if you mess it up, own it. Because again, what happens in your office happens around the world. Everyone's going to know. You want to seek to understand. You can't assume anything. Hold on to your judgments and actively listen to what other millennials are saying to you. Try to understand what they're trying to explain to you. This is a difficult thing to do because the generational gap, you just want to shake your head and go, really? Seriously? And you can't. You absolutely have to try to understand where they're coming from and offer advice and feedback. Not criticism, but advice and feedback. Set a shared expectation. This is one of the most important steps in understanding and getting along and bridging a gap and communicating and collaborating with millennials, is that when you hire a millennial, make sure they understand what the expectation is. Make sure you set shared goals. We're going to accomplish this task, and here's how it fits into the bigger picture. I know this sounds babying, but it's not. I mean, think about it. If you explain the bigger picture to people, they're more engaged. They're more willing to put effort forward to make it successful. So it's not just millennials, really, but millennials in particular, you want to make sure that you set a set of goals that you both agree to and are willing to work towards achieving. And my last goal is that you have to understand there isn't just one right way. And believe me, as a millennial father, I've learned this really quickly. Mow the lawn, I mow it right to left, and they mow it north to south, and it's just simple, crazy things like that. They have a way of doing things, and more cases than none, they're going to accomplish a task because they're willing to travel or do whatever it takes to make it right. They're willing to do what they need to do to solve a problem. Patricia.
Perfect, wonderful. Well, you can see by the comments, a lot of people are finding this very, very interesting. I certainly am, because so many of my clients, because as you know, a lot of my work is sales presentation skills training and is helping them better communicate. Because so often when you spend so long online and you're texting, that's your way of communicating. Right. When you have to do a demo, sometimes what you say, the structure and how you say it is not as perfect as a lot of my clients want. So with that, Paul, can we go to Fripp VT and show, now this is good for millennials because it's so interactive and fun and almost a gamified way to train. However, it's valuable for everybody. So of course in Fripp VT, Fripp Virtual Training, which is the easiest, most convenient, quickest, cost-effective way to learn to improve your presentation skills and sales presentations, good for all generations. So Paul, specifically, because as Michael said, with the millennials, they want a demo fast. They've already done the research before they come to talk to us. So let's specifically look at the course on superstar sales presentations.
Welcome to Superstar Sales Presentations, the Inside Secrets. In this course, you will learn the secrets of making your sales presentations more compelling. This will give you a seemingly unfair advantage over your competition. If you're ready, click the Start Training button. Life is a series of sales situations. Every day you sell yourself, your ideas, your value, your point of view, your product, or your service. Every sales conversation and presentation is a missed or captured opportunity. If you sound the same as everybody else, you have no advantage. This course is looking at what you are learning about effective presentations, specifically as it relates to the sales process.
And what you have that all generations like, but as you know, Michael, training is very different now. It has to be interactive. So even online, I speak for a couple of minutes and then I'll say, well, let's see if you've been paying attention. Is it this, or that? So they can certainly engage and be actively involved. And naturally, you can see this on any of your mobile devices, wherever you are.
Of course.
Now, a lot of my clients say we need the words of what to say. So, Paul, can you just go to the course on the executive overview, just so we, and of course, with all the chapters within the courses here, we certainly have, in this case, the executive overview, the actual scripts of what we say. Suddenly I'm quiet.
Be clear, concise, and credible. Deliver an executive. If you have to deliver an executive overview to a client or customer, be clear, concise, and credible. When you adapt this simple framework to your situation, you will get results. Remember, with an executive, you want to be clear, concise, credible, very respectful, and able to bottom line your message. Be sure to make heroes of those who are your internal contacts with the client company. Good morning, Mr. Smith. On behalf of our leadership and my team, thank you for your business.
All right, so that is a sample of how we help with what you say, why you say it, and how you say it. So, Paul, if we can come back to Michael, and do we have any specific questions about what Michael has said?
Yes, and Kim asked earlier when you were talking about some of the research, how does this apply to a more global population? For example, in China, students are getting degrees and are working harder than Americans.
Yeah, I gave a speech. I would just mention I gave a millennial speech on Tuesday of this past week, and I had almost the exact same question. And unfortunately, I just don't know. There is very little research out there on millennials outside of the United States. And the only thing I can say is that depending upon the country, that will determine the type of individual that comes out, the type of millennial that comes out of that country. So, for example, a millennial born in Russia is certainly going to be different than a millennial born in Germany. And beyond that, I'm gonna look around. I'll be back. Patricia and I will have another conversation at another time, and I will come back with some numbers on this because I am absolutely going to go do the research and figure it out. I'm sorry, I just don't know.
Okay, and certainly any questions that we do not answer, because we have to be respectful of your time, Michael will have them and will answer them. So, Paul, certainly, can we put up the poll, was this information valuable? We would, obviously, we have webinars that one, partly are on the interest of those we invite and my different celebrity friends who want to help us out. This subject was certainly very, very popular. Now, Michael, do you have any advice? So we talk about how the millennials' buying process is different. We start more with the demo. And then if a millennial is selling to us, especially I'm thinking of my client companies who hire millennials, are there, apart from teaching them what to say and improving their presentation skills, any advice if a millennial is trying to sell us?
Now, advice for us or advice for the millennial?
Well, I would say if they're going to sell us, who are a different generation, what advice would you give them or their sales managers to help train them?
Yeah, interesting. There are a few skills that I believe millennials need to learn. Financial acumen to start with. They need to understand and learn how to read a financial statement. They need to understand how to look for key information or trigger event type information within, say, the MD&A, the management discussion and analysis on the front end of a 10K. That's the first skill I think millennials lack. I don't see a whole lot of millennials that understand financial acumen. The second thing is millennials have to do, and this we talked about a little bit before, is how are they going to understand other generations, is that every generation, well, let me rephrase that. Millennials are used to having access to the world, right? They're great with the internet. They're very good with email and social media. Their parents have told them they could talk to or do anything their whole life, but they need to learn that they don't have access to everyone within an organization. What I love about millennials, and especially like my son, for example, is they are fearless. They will absolutely call anybody, email anybody. They will talk to anybody. They are very socially adept, even though you think that they're very technologically as opposed to face-to-face, but they're really good. Their networks are huge. Remember, they've been gaming for years with people all over the world, so they have a great network. They're very good at LinkedIn, for example. So my advice to those millennials is, realize that yes, you can try to talk to anybody, and don't be afraid. Don't ever be afraid. Learn some basic skills like basic sales skills, financial acumen. Learn how to do an executive presentation, and hone those skills that even Patricia, the things that you teach people. These are things that I'm a baby boomer, and you taught me a whole bunch when we were just starting, or you taught me many things when we first started talking.
I taught you some specific techniques.
You did. You did, and sent me a bill for it. No.
Not at all. Yeah, and this brings up some advice I would give, because one of the key messages that I incorporate in my training is specificity builds credibility.
Yeah.
When people call me, and I just had a voicemail. Someone was trying to sell me something that I don't know that I was that interested in, but I was a target in the demographic they were looking for. And 3 times they said, you guys, we identified your company as someone that would like this, and you guys. And I wrote back and I said, well, thank you. I replied to his email. I say, as 1, I am not interested. However, 2, you said you were familiar with my company, so therefore you should know my name, and I make a point of not buying from people who consistently call me you guys. Mm-hmm. So specificity builds credibility. Be clear, concise, and credible. Now, Michael, if people would like to contact you, and you'll be glad to know 95% think this information is very valuable. I'm sorry for the 5% that don't. Now, Paul, would you like to bring up if anyone is specifically interested in contacting Michael? Can we go to his website and then also put it in the chat box? All right, there we are. So perfect. And Michael, so this is your website, and if people wanted to buy your book, which of course is Adapt or Fail, which is certainly around our subject matter, is there anywhere on the website they would find this?
I think you'd have to go to we have two websites. This is the Technology Finance Partners website. There's also ROIforsales.com. It's ROI, the number 4, sales, SALES.com. And there's a resource section, and you can look at all my books.
Well,
Adapt
I
or Fail.
assure Paul with just give him a couple of moments, and it will be there, and you can direct our friends. There we are.
Right. So under resources, there's a purchase books, and you can get them there. You could go to Amazon directly. A lot of bookstores carry several of my books as well. There you go. There's Adapt or Fail. You scroll down, there's Key to the C-Suite, ROI Selling, Why Johnny Can't Sell.
And why can't Johnny sell?
You know, interestingly enough, I wrote that book, and it was about how times have changed, and Johnny didn't change with it. So it was my book. It was my precursor to Adapt or Fail. It was all about as a sales, and it was really targeted at a friend of mine that was a baby boomer, and he just found a job in a new company, and everything changed on him. You know, the way company did things, the technology, things like that, and he had a hard time adapting. And so it's a book on really how to adapt to the changes in the organization. It's about tools, process, and training.
Okay, perfect. Well, if you can bring back Michael's face, thank you. And Paul, if you would like to put up a poll, if anyone would like Michael to contact them or Patricia to contact them, they can let us know. And then, Paul, if there are any more short, specific, burning questions, we will take them before I ask Michael to give us his concluding remarks. Yeah. So,
sorry. I think there was one quick one, if he wants to touch on it briefly, and if you want to expand over email later, you can. From Kim, she would love to know what you recommend when a millennial is vetting your product to recommend to a decision maker. What drives them then? How do you influence in this way? And what is the most important thing in this case?
Well, not knowing your product, it's a little hard to say what the most important thing is, but I would try to understand first, what is the problem they're trying to solve? I mean, that's the key to all success. How you communicate and collaborate with a millennial is what's going to make the difference between you and your competition. So if you're willing to grow and listen and collaborate, communicate, take on texting, LinkedIn with them, and do all the things necessary to build trust and you know, you saw that list of things, then I think you can win. Without knowing your product, it's a little hard to say what the most important thing is. I mean, that's my quick and dirty advice.
And we really appreciate the great information, and certainly the PowerPoint, the handout from the PowerPoint will be available for everyone after.
Yes.
Yes, so if Paul has it, he will send it out to everyone who registers, whether they were in person or live. So do you have some concluding remarks?
I think that you need to understand that the future is in our millennials, and we need to get along with them. We need to figure out a way to communicate, collaborate, sell to, get sold from. They truly are the future. They really are.
Good, and I would thank everyone for their attendance and for viewing after. Feel free when you get the replay link, if you want to share it with any of your friends, that's quite okay with us. When it comes to training all generations, this is the dirty little secret from the training industry, and Michael and I have made comfortable living for many decades in the world of training. When you have an eager audience and a great speaker and content that the audience is interested in, and they are totally engaged, 2 weeks later, they will have forgotten 70% of what they learned. So the only way that you can really reinforce and learn a skill is through repetition and reinforcement. I would encourage you all to go to Fripp, VT, as in Fripp, virtualtraining.com, take a free trial. And if you would like a conversation or a demo, we're very happy to set that up. If you want a conversation with Michael, I promise you he'll get back to you very soon. And you will have all our contact information. So Michael, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Paul, thank you very much for being our moderator. And our dear audience, thank you for tuning in. Watch your emails. Bye.